Okay, guys. Well, just to start off a couple of minutes early so I can test whether everything's working fine as far as audio and video is concerned. So if you guys can let me know whether you can see or hear me okay, that'd be great. And then we'll wait 2 minutes or so before we get started. Sorry, guys, I didn't get you any coffee, so you're going to have to get your own. Can you hear me okay? Hello, hello, hello. All right. Audio check. 1, 2, testing, testing, 1, 2, testing. All right, so I'll wait 1 more minute, and then it's officially 10:30, at least where I live, 10:30, and then we'll get started, right? So while we're waiting, how are you guys doing? Anything special going on? Anybody get hired by Pixar or, bought Disney or something? Okay. Right, guys. Well, it's 10:30 on the dot, so let's get started. So what I wanted to talk to you about today is based on a conversation that I had yesterday with a good friend. He's also the CEO of VRBN Studios, specializing in 3D environments. And we had a discussion about what makes a good model great, right? Now, in my opinion, that is kind of the difference between a good artist and a great artist. And once people get to the point where they have the technical skills, so they know where all the buttons are in, Blender, ZBrush, Maya, 3ds Max, whatever. They know the technical workflow, so they know how to create, texture maps and bake and do all that stuff. Then they tend to plateau. So they start off, let's say, at 0, right? Then they go up, they ramp up, they get more knowledge and so forth, and then they level off, and it seems they're not improving. So what I want to talk about today is what is the difference between a good artist and a great artist, and what can you do to become better, right? And I'll address a couple of questions that I got. And then you guys have the opportunity to ask questions yourself, and we'll take it from there. Is that okay? Somebody give me a thumbs up that you guys still can hear me okay. Oh, so somebody dropped the big bang for me. Wow, that's an honor. I mean, that's hard to compete with. Okay, guys, so question number 1. And I just want to keep this as interactive as possible because I want to hear your opinion on this, right? So question number 1 is, I get this question all the time. People will ask me, how do I get good references for modeling? Is that something that you deal with yourself? Let me know. Anybody struggling with that? Anybody having issues finding good reference photos or whatnot? Okay, cool. All right. So first of all, do you always need a reference? Now, the typical answer would be yes. People always say, use a reference because, then it's, your model will be better and whatnot. I, on occasion, do tutorials where I don't use a reference for the simple reason that what I want to do is test my visual skills. So what I will do is I will see an object. Let's say, I don't know, I see a trash can somewhere, and I kind of memorize how the thing is constructed, the width, the height, and so forth and so on. And then I model it from memory. Now, if it were for a client or something like that, I never would do that. I would always use a reference. But it's a good practice to understand how something is constructed, because what goes wrong with models all the time is that they seem off because the dimensions are off, right? So you would have, let's say, a street scene, you would have cars and light posts and whatever, and then the traffic light would be too big or too small, the park bench would be too big or too small or too wide or something like that. and you can't really pinpoint it. You know something's going on. You know that it's not okay, but you don't know what, right? So here are a couple of things that you can do to make sure you get good references. Now, first of all, oddly enough, there are a lot of restoration videos on YouTube, right? So somebody will take a tool or a car or whatever, and they will strip it apart completely and rebuild it from scratch. Now, how does that help you as a 3D artist? Well, first of all, you get a very good understanding of how it is constructed, which in my opinion is very important as a 3D artist. Once you know how everything is put together, you get a better understanding of space, you get a better understanding of proportion, and you have a better understanding of how to approach the actual modeling process, right? Now, the other question that I think I got this question yesterday. Somebody said something like, do you have a reference to model the wheel of a car or something like that, right? And my question was, well, first of all, if you go on Google, right, and you type in, wheel of a car, you're going to get like a million photos. But let's say it's something more difficult than that. For example, a while back, a good friend of mine, Henry Cervenka, did a guest tutorial series on a loader, right? Now, if you want to do something like that and you don't have a reference, what you do is you find a dealership, right? Or you go to a construction site and you take photos of an actual loader. And I never hear people do that. And it's so obvious, right? So that's what I would do. Okay, what else? There are websites out there that actually contain reference data. So there are websites where it will tell you exactly how wide and how high a wall socket is in Europe and how that compares to a wall socket, let's say, in the US or in the UK. How wide a park bench is, how tall a traffic light is, and so forth and so on, right? And there are actually websites that do that. Now, by far, the biggest mistake you can make is getting the proportions wrong, okay? Right, so what else? Blueprint websites. You have tons and tons of websites that have hundreds and thousands of blueprints, especially if you're into, let's say, car modeling or something like that, right? If you're into car modeling and you're modeling an existing specific car, you can most times find the exact blueprints to do so. You'll see the front, the side, and all that, right? And I think there's a website called blueprints.com, but if you just Google blueprints, hey, Henry Cervenka just got on. Hi, buddy. I was just talking about you in a good way, obviously. So I think it's blueprints.com, something like that, right? Now, if you can't find there what you're looking for, then another idea is to look for orthographic in your Google search, right? So you would say orthographic image. So let's say you want a blueprint of, I don't know, let's say a helmet or something, right? You would type in orthographic helmet or orthographic military helmet or something like that. Most cases, you will then get a front view, side view, top view, and so forth. And then you can use it as a reference, okay? All right, so let's see what else. So restoration videos, check them out online. They're everywhere. That will teach you the construction. Then take photos of the actual object if you haven't, if you can't find anything online, and that way you can control that process completely. And nowadays you have a lot of options to use apps on your phone to actually scan it in 3D. And by the way, I'll be doing a video on a new app very soon. I get contacted by a company that does that kind of thing, and I gave it a try. It's amazing. So if you're on location and you like a room, let's say you're in a cathedral or something, and you want to model that later on, you use the scan app to scan the entire cathedral like in 5 minutes, and then you take it home and you basically have a 3D model to base that on, right? So I'm going to be doing a video on that. So just remember. Okay, and then the next one is making sketches. Now, how does that help? Again, if you are looking at a physical object and you don't have your phone or you can't take photos or whatever, making sketches actually helps you to memorize dimensions, scales, and so forth, right? So just take a little piece of paper and a pencil, something like that. Make a rough sketch from different angles, different views, and that will help you, right? Okay. All right, so any questions about references so far before I get on to the next subject? Let's see what kind of questions you guys are asking here. Okay, so Stefan is saying, what's the name of the application you use for getting or saving references? Well, that could be anything, unless you are referring to the comment by Pedro who's talking about PureRef. If your reference is a photograph, save it. If it's an image, save it. You know, this is how you do that. Let's see. Will there be more lessons on UV texturing? I assume you're talking about UVing for the purpose of texturing. Yes, there will be. How do I become a 3D modeling artist? I got about 1,047 videos online. I suggest you start watching those. How can I improve my topology and know what I'm doing wrong with the topology with the current model? Okay, so let me go into topology just a little bit here. I mean, we're talking about something different, but this is actually a question for later, but I'll get into it. Clean topology means that spacing should be kind of uniform on your model, right? So you don't want a bunch of edge loops close together and then others wide apart, unless you have areas in your model where you need more detail. So let's say you have a 3D character and then the head has way more detail than the body, right? The body would be a bit more low poly. Let's say the area around the nose or the eyes or the ears are more high poly. You would increase that flow. But what you want to try to do is make sure that that flow is as organic as possible. So for example, if you know later on that your character will be animated, rigged and animated around, for example, the mouth, you know how a mouth moves, right? So you need to have an edge flow that supports that. I did a couple of videos on clean topology, so I suggest you check that out, right? Let's see. Okay, interesting question. How do you aim for industry standard? What elements do you need to achieve and aim for? Well, that kind of depends on what industry you're talking about. Are you talking about the game industry? Are you talking about the movie industry? Are you talking about commercial or corporate clients? So that's always different. However, it's up to you as a 3D artist to get a good understanding of what the client wants. So you can research that to an extent. You can actually talk to people that you know that work for a company or own a company and say, do you ever use 3D models? What are your requirements? Do you care what software it's made in? And so forth and so on, right? Okay, so let's move on to the next one. And I think this is kind of important. People will ask me, how do I improve my texturing, right? Now, I'm not talking about the knowledge of understanding the technical process of how you apply textures, right? So, you know, baking and all that. I'm talking about how do you make your textures better, right? And I really am blown away by the fact that people don't seem to get this. And I'll try to explain. Okay. Let's say you have a story of, I don't know, a Humvee. I don't know if you guys know what a Humvee is, but it's like a military vehicle, you know, running through the desert and whatnot, right? Okay. So people will model a Humvee, and then this is supposed to be a Humvee, you know, deployed in the desert and whatnot. And the Humvee is squeaky clean, right? There's not one speck of dust on the whole thing. Now, if you do it like that, you clearly don't understand what's going on. I mean, your model needs to support a storyline, okay? So it's up to you and important for you to understand what that storyline is. Now, maybe there is no storyline because you just want to go out and model something. Well, if there is no storyline, then make a storyline, okay? And that will help you to understand what the texture should look like. And what do I mean by texture? I mean paint layers, I mean rust, I mean mud, I mean dirt, I mean scratches, I mean dents, all of that, right? Okay, so let's say you do have a storyline. How do you understand how that works? Well, I don't know if any of you guys do photography here and if any of you know what macro photography is. Macrophotography is basically taking photos in a extremely zoomed in level, right? So, let's say the legs of a little bug or insect or whatnot. Now, what you can do with that is you can go and study details of objects. Let's say the rim of a car, right? Of a wheel. All right. Okay, so you look at the wheel, and then you take your camera, your phone or whatever, and you make literally photos this far from the wheel, right? And you will start to see things that you have never seen before. Because you never look at a wheel like that, right? You will see what happens to a wheel when you actually use it, right? So it has grease on it, it has dirt on it, it has mud on it, but also you understand where it's located. So what areas, right, have a lot and what areas don't. Now, on my channel, Henry Cervenka did a guest tutorial series, a 5-part series on how to model a loader, basically let's call it a dirt moving machine, I guess. I don't know what to call that. If you look at how he textured it as far as where the dirt and grime is, this is spot on, because he first of all, he knows what he's doing because he's an amazing artist, right? But he takes his time to study his subject, study the object that he's modeling, and understand what it's about. Now, I know people that will go out to a dealership, they will study a machine like that, they will look videos about a machine like that, they will take close-up photos of it, they'll make sketches of it, and that will make your model so much better, right? Okay, before I go further, Stefan is saying, answer the question. So let's see what question that is, because he's saying something about losing connection. So Stefan, just let me know what question you want me to answer, okay? So I don't have to go back and read everything. And while you're doing that, one major point I want to address before I go into the open questions area, right, is who of you have ever written a short story before you started to work on your 3D model? And I'll just give you guys a sec to answer that, because I'd really want to know. Okay, so let's see. Still waiting on a response from Stefan, and still waiting to hear from you guys on whether you guys have written a story. To ask for feedback. Okay, some people are doodling. The school count. Okay, so it seems that a number of you are actually using stories. Now, I don't mean writing a complete script. I don't mean, like a movie script or anything like that, but keep it simple. For example, if you're creating a vehicle, right? Try to imagine that vehicle in a certain place, right? So where is that vehicle? Is it in the middle of New York? Is it going to be, on a beach somewhere? Is it going to be in a desert? Is it going to be in a swamp? Where? So what type of texture would you see on the car? Would it be pristine clean, like at a dealership on a shiny floor with a lot of lights on it? Is it going to be a vehicle that has been used? Is it like a farm tractor or whatever? And then think about, okay, so what type of texturing would you see on that? Now, if you are modeling a tractor that's been used on farmland, you're going to have water, you're going to have rust, you're going to have dirt, you're going to have scratches, you're going to have dents, you're going to have all of that. And in a certain order, right? Okay. Yeah, so that's the story part. Now, let's get into some questions from you guys, because this is intended to get some thoughts flowing for you guys. And I want to see what you guys are struggling with to improve your skills, okay? So give me some questions, and we'll just throw this wide open and see if we can make an open discussion, okay? Okay, so Andrew here is saying, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not going for hyper realistic. Well, the thing is, even if it's not hyper realistic, even if it's completely stylized, even if it's cartoony, you still have the same issue, right? I mean, if you look at old 2D cartoons like Wile E. Coyote and the Flintstones and whatnot, right? Even in situations like that, it is the detail that sells it. And I don't mean detail by saying hyper realistic, but detail as into added features or added textures that help to do that, right? Okay, let's see. Okay, storyboards. I see some comments on storyboards, which is always really cool. And if you're making a simple model, like I said, it doesn't have to be a full-blown story. You can just write down a couple of lines, right? So let's say, I don't know, spaceship, right? Okay, cool. So is it a spaceship going from one planet to the other? Is it a spaceship in one atmosphere for one planet? And what planet is it going to? A spaceship on Mars would probably be covered in red dirt, right? Spaceship, I don't know, doing tourist travels from the planet Earth to the edge of the atmosphere like Virgin Atlantic is doing, right, would probably be pristine clean, and so forth and so on. What is the purpose of use? I don't know if you guys ever been into a military plane. A military plane feels way more industrial and heavy duty and unfinished compared to a commercial airline plane. That kind of stuff, right? Okay, let's see. Any tips on large space modeling? Okay. Well, I don't know if you guys are aware of the term called kit bashing, but when you model large spaceships, you kind of get into the technical aspect first, because if you're adding a whole bunch of detail, you need to be worrying about poly count, right? And you don't want to have a crazy high poly model if it's going to be like a background prop or something. So the technical aspect aside, you need to try to incorporate things that make sense. I'll explain that. Let's say you have people living in a spaceship. They're that big, right? I see people do that, and then they have a spaceship where the doors are this high. That doesn't make sense, because it will be additional expense to make it that way. It'd be a waste of space to make it that way. The spaceship would be unnecessarily large to do it that way, and so forth. Now, the best sci-fi models are always models that could be real, right? So what they do in sci-fi movies is they will come up with some fantastic design for something that has never been built before, but it has elements that we recognize. We see hydraulic hoses, we see couplings, we see latches, we see all that kind of stuff. And that is what it sells it, right? So when you do a large spaceship like that, think about the logistics. So, okay, what is the purpose of the spaceship? Is it for cargo? Is it for people? If it is for people, where do the people go in? Where do they go out? You know, are there seats? Are there cabins? What's going on? And based on that, you kind of develop a story, and then from there you start to model it, right? Okay, let's see what else. Okay. Let's see. Just to achieve goals. Okay, so Andrew is saying, would disagree with the door size thing in Dune. Well, the thing is this, right? Let's go back to the whole beam me up, Scotty thing, right? Okay, so people get on a circle, right? And you got this light situation going on, and they're disappeared, right? They got this transponder thing going on, and they're gone. Now, this is a totally unrealistic thing, especially back in the day, because it doesn't exist and it's not feasible, and nobody would believe that, right? However, because they made it a platform, because they made circles that are human size, because it's vertical like humans are, and so forth and so on, it kind of sells that, right? Now, of course, you can have spaceships in movies and in games that have huge, huge, huge doors. But usually when they do, there's a reason, because you need to have spaceships go in or cargo go in or stuff like that, right? But it all boils down to what I said before, the proportions. If you have something that is unnecessarily large, where there's no way to explain that and it doesn't make sense, it doesn't add to the quality. And just because a movie is a blockbuster doesn't mean it's good, right? I mean, if you look at an average Marvel movie nowadays, I personally take issue in the fact that a lot of effects are there just because they can be there. And it's so over the top that at some point it gets in the way of the actual story, right? If you have a high-speed chasing scene where you got, I don't know, 58 cars flipping through the air and exploding in 2 minutes, it's a bit much, right? Let's see. Okay, so all right. So how do you composite a render outdoors? What do you mean by, you mean compositing the renders by layer stacking? Is that what you mean? I'm not sure what you mean, Andrew. Can you explain? Okay, so Stefan was looking for PureF. Okay. Okay, so Andrew's saying, how do you divide the assets? Oh, okay. So you mean from a modeling standpoint? So let's say you are modeling a city. How do you divide the assets? Is that what you're saying? Okay, okay, right. Okay, well, it's funny you mentioned that, because nowadays almost every city or environment you see is procedural, right? And like I said in the beginning of this meeting here, or this chat live stream, I was talking to Matthias Bühler. He's the CEO of VRBN Studios. They specialize in 3D environments, and basically they build entire cities procedural based. So it's more a process than a model, if that makes sense. Okay, and you're saying, okay, for animation, well, animation, okay, so with animation, I assume you mean movie, right? So sequel rendering, right? And yes, that's how they would do it. I mean, you can do that in games too. I think that's definitely the future for environments, because you have applications like a City Engine and so forth. And you can literally build an entire city in a matter of days. I mean, I spoke to the crew that worked on The Incredibles 2. I don't know if you guys saw that movie. The senior artist that was responsible for the environment took me through his pipeline, and it is 100% procedural, right? Okay, so Andrew's saying procedural. How would I do that? Well, basically how that works is, I'll try to explain this in a very simple way, right? So basically what you do is you take a platform, whether it's flat or has hills or whatever, right? And you kind of develop a plan, what you want. So you say, okay, I want a street layout. I want a street to go here. I want a street to go there, and so forth and so on, right? Once you have all those streets laid out, then you're going to say, okay, how many buildings do I want in each section? And how big can these buildings be? So you take one city block and you say, okay, I want to have, I don't know, 10 buildings in that area. And then what you do is you link that information to a database of ready-made models, right? And instead of copying them, you instance them, right? And then you link it together and you say, okay, now go ahead and populate this entire city with buildings. And I want a randomizer. I don't want 2 of the same buildings within a 10 block radius. I want a certain height ratio. I want a certain width ratio, and so forth. And then once all of that is set up, if you want to change the city layout, you can change the street layout and then rerun the sequence. You'll get different models. You can change the textures based on database as well. That's why it's called procedural. So if you need a city covered in snow, for example, you would need different texturing, right? And then you wouldn't have to go out and recreate the entire city. You can procedurally change a city into a city covered in snow, Does that make sense? I'm trying to explain it, but please, somebody say that makes sense. Okay. Let's see what else, guys. Okay, cool. So Foxhill is saying something about the car's manpower and money can be used in an important impacted sequence in the movie, right? Okay. Now, again, and this is kind of personal taste, right? I mean, when I see a movie that is way, way, way over the top, and I think most movies are moving that way, I think it gets in the way of the story, right? And it doesn't really help. I'm not saying, if you get the typical Marvel movie, Iron Man and all that, I mean, it's okay, but everything has to, explode 27 times and cars have to flip 89 times and that kind of stuff. It's just a little bit too much, right? There's a quote saying, the best CG is CG you don't notice, right? I completely agree with that. For example, I talked to some people from a VFX studio, and I asked them, what is the primary work you do, right? And I was expecting, okay, they're going to do, explosions and all that. And they said, well, actually, they call it quite boring. And I said, okay, so give me an example. Well, they would say, okay, they would have a real life movie, right? And they would have the main actor, right, walking around with a weapon on his hip, right? Now, the actor would say, I don't want to walk around with this heavy weapon all day long because it's annoying, right? I don't want that, right? So he would wear an empty belt. And then later on in post, they would add that weapon as CG, right? Or they would replace muzzle flares from gunshots with CG because the actual muzzle flash doesn't look great, right? All that kind of stuff. Now, that is the bread and butter for the typical VFX artist. I think it's way, way, way cooler than having, 5 million explosions in 2 minutes, right? Okay, let's see what else. Text, let's use the movies. Okay, how to improve our shows. Let's see, you mean don't show what you can tell? Well, that's part of it. I mean, and this is kind of going into a different direction, but I don't know, you guys are probably way too young to know about Alfred Hitchcock, right? But Alfred Hitchcock was back in the day, and this is like black and white movies, right? This guy was called the master of suspense because he could scare the shit out of you, right? Without even showing what you were scared about, right? That is storytelling. Yeah, there you go. Psycho, right? So that is a skill. And I mean, if you make things over obvious and you have it right in your face, clear as day, there's no suspense. I mean, if you look at the whole genre of thriller movies, right? Suspense movies, the whole point is not to show what you're scared of, right? I mean, for example, back in the day when they made Jaws, you probably heard of Jaws with the shark and Steven Spielberg or whatever, right? Now, Steven Spielberg had a huge issue with this shark, the mechanical shark, because it wasn't working properly. The thing failed like, I don't know, 80% of the time. And the reason why is they tested it in fresh water, but they forgot to test it in salt water. So when they started doing the actual takes of the movie, the thing didn't work properly, and they had to keep it out of 80% of the shots while the thing was very expensive, right? So what they ended up doing is adding some great music, right, and building suspense without actually showing the shark. And as a result, the movie became way, way better. And the funny note is this, that the mechanical Jaws, or the mechanical shark they used by Steven Spielberg, they nicknamed him Bruce because that was the name of Steven Spielberg's lawyer. So I thought it was pretty funny. Okay, what else, guys? Still Scared of Birds. Yeah, that was another great movie. So I guess if you are working as a 3D artist, most likely you're part of a process to tell a story, right? Whether it's a game, whether it's a real life movie, whether it's an animated movie, you are part of a team telling a story, right? And understanding how stories are told and understanding, what it takes to do that will make you a much better artist. People tend to focus on the technical aspect. They will know everything about Maya, 3ds Max, Blender. They will have clean topology. They will have great UVs. They know how to texture. But the end result is a model that looks very clinical and it doesn't speak to you, if you know what I mean, right? Let's see, the old Star Trek didn't show its spaceships a lot. Well, first of all, the old Star Trek, that wasn't CG. That was, the practical props. So let's see, any suggestions for us who are into manufacturing? Not sure what you mean by that, but hey, Steffi, let's see. The thing is this, I actually made a note about this. I tend to visit factories a lot. Even when I have a day off, I will go and visit a factory. I will go to shoe factories. I will go to motorcycle factories, car dealerships, place where they sell bulldozers, anything and everything. For the simple reason that when you do so, you get a better understanding of how things are used, how they're constructed, what type of materials they're using, and that helps you to get a whole different view on how things are made, right? And there's actually this show, I think it's called on Discovery Channel or something, how it's made. That's kind of cool. Okay, so Tushar is saying it's hard to find Maya beginner tutorials. Can you make a playlist for it? Well, there's one called MH Tutorials. I would say every Maya tutorial I ever made, and I think I'm somewhere around, I don't know, 700 videos, something like that. All of them should be suitable for a beginner. Let's see here. Let me see what you're saying here. I'm learning that in university how models look. Try and make models with a story of their own. It's a model scratch marked. Yeah, exactly. So I'll tell you, there's. I did a review of a 3D artist a couple of years ago, and actually, I think I put that on my channel as well. And what people would do is they would send me their ArtStation page, or they would have a clip or something, and then they would say, review it, right? Now, what I saw was the bridge of a ship. The ship is sitting in the harbor, right? And it's very eerie because there's nobody on board and it's abandoned or something, or everybody's dead, or I don't know what's going on, right? But it's very suspenseful, very scary music's going on. And then you have the bridge of the ship. It's kind of rocking like that, up and down, which is awesome, right? Nice detail. Now, the thing is, there's a coffee mug on that desk, right, with a pen in it, right? Now, the ship is rocking like that, right? And then you hear squeaking noises and all that, and the desk is going up and down, and as a result, the coffee mug is going up and down like that as well, and the pen in the mug is not moving, right? That annoyed the hell out of me because that kills the entire story, right? Now, again, it might be a great model. You got a great coffee mug, you got a great pen, but if it doesn't support the story, it's not good. That's how simple it is. Exactly, damn pen, yep. Let's see, what else? Okay, any more questions, guys? Okay, I want to go on for, let's say, another, I don't know, 11 minutes, okay? So if you guys have any questions, let me know. Okay, great question. How do you keep motivating yourself? Well, there's a very simple answer to that. And I hear this every day. The best way to motivate yourself is to have a very simple and clear understanding why you are doing this, right? So, for example, people get into 3D because they need to have a creative outlet, right? They're full of creativity, they have to do something, right? Now, once they're working on it, they start to they lose their focus because they're focusing on other things. I need to make money, I need to make the client happy, I need to do all of these things, and they forget about why they got into this in the first place, right? Now, let's say that the creative outlet is the most important aspect for you, right? Write it on a piece of paper, stick it on your wall, right? Every day, look at that piece of paper. That piece of paper is number one, whatever you do. Sure, you have to make money. Sure, you have to keep your clients happy. But that has to be your focus always. Now, as soon as you lose focus on that, you're running after things that are not important to you. You will lose interest. You will lose courage. You will think you'll never make it, and you probably won't, right? So keep your eye on the ball. Hope that makes sense. Let's see. Post-production in 3D really. Is post-production in 3D really important? As having black background is just simple. Okay. Post-production is everything. I mean, more and more things are done in post-production. And I'm not saying that's a great thing, because what happens in the movie industry is the speed of getting movies out becomes faster and faster and faster. Somebody will have a script for a movie. They will walk around with that movie script for years, and nobody wants to touch it because there's no budget and nobody wants to take it on, right? Finally, some studio says, okay, I will invest in it. They will get this ridiculous timeline, right? And say it has to be done in this amount of time and for this amount of money, right? So what they will do, instead of doing 5 or 10 takes on a scene, they'll do it in one, right? And say, we'll fix that in post, right? So as technology advances and you can do more and more stuff, CG wise, you see that happening more and more. And as a result, for example, and this is one thing that annoys me a lot, whenever you see buildings that are on fire in a movie, or smoke coming from the building or fire coming from the building, it's usually not good. You can see in 1 second that it's fake, right? Because it's way cheaper to do that than to actually torch an actual building, right? But if you're going to do it in post, then at least have somebody do it that knows how to do it. Make sense? Let's see. How to learn to make good. Okay, how to learn to make good 3D art coming from engineering programming background, even if all I end up doing is simulating a Houdini. Okay, well, first of all, I started off in engineering, and I guess it's all about find your passion in life, why you want to do this, focus on that and work towards that. I mean, the fact that you come from engineering doesn't matter, right? I mean, there are people from all walks of life to do this. Let's see. Mahmoud is saying, I'm 40 years old. That's my second film shooting now, and I'm working in model that I don't want it to look ugly. What is the workflow that I should follow to try to stick with the old film? Well, that's a little bit vague, so it's kind of hard to answer that. Kind of depends on, well, it kind of relates to what I said before. Whatever you're modeling has to be period correct and story correct, right? If the model you're making doesn't fit the scene because it's not dirty enough, not damaged enough, not time correct, the height width ratio is off, anything that puts it out of character or out of spot is not a good thing. So the way to fix that is research. Understand, okay, where's my model going to be? What should it look like? That's all about references, okay? Does Maya have a lot of shortcut keys? Yep, a ton of them. Sign before, how can I do my mindset before creating a creature model? Okay. I think I know what you're saying here, and I know that there are a bunch of people in this chat right now that know a lot more about characters than I do. But that said, I know a lot of people that do great characters, and they tell me stuff. So although I'm not a great character artist, I do know a thing or two specifically from them, right? Now, funny enough, making a believable character ties very much into what I said before about making that spaceship, right? People need to have the ability to relate. So if you are creating a fantasy character, right, it's usually, at least in movies, it's usually a combination of existing animals or existing characters. So, for example, there's this Disney movie. I don't know what the thing is again. I don't know what the name is, but it's a little dragon type deal. I don't know what the name is. It's like a Chinese girl and a dragon, whatever. I talked to some folks at Disney, and they told me that when they did research for this thing, right, they came up with like 5 or 6 different animals, and they took parts of each animal. No, it's not How to Train Your Dragon. It's Mogu something, whatever, Disney movie. And they said, okay, we Mulan. There you go. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's the one. So in Mulan, you have this character, and it's a part lizard, it's part chicken, it's part snake, it's part all kinds of stuff. Why is it so believable? Because there are elements of the character that you recognize, right? Now, what I said before, if you're making something that doesn't exist, like, for example, a spaceship or whatever, right? Try to put some elements in there that people can relate to, because they know what a hinge looks like, or they know what a door looks like. Now, if you see a fantasy character and you know, for example, from other movies, what a dragon looks like or what wings look like, it makes it more believable. Especially with characters, movement is important. If it's going to be an animated character, try to have it move in a way that looks familiar to you, right? Although it's a fantasy character. Let's say there's another movie, and again, I don't think I can remember the name of it, but I saw a behind the scenes footage of it, and it was awesome. It's the Gentle Giant something. Again, it's a very cool movie. Don't recall the name. Anyway, there's some huge giant type deal characters, right? And they had actual people play mocap for it, right? Now, the problem was that people walk like people and they don't walk like giants. So because we don't have any real giants, how do you get around making somebody walk like a giant, right? Well, a giant is very heavy, so they move very slow, and they have impact when they hit the ground, and they got a certain weight distribution going on, right? So what they did is they put straps on their legs, and they had them carry weights, like lifting weights, on those straps between their legs, right? So they would walk very odd and funny and whatever. And because they used that mocap data for these giants, they looked so realistic. It was unbelievable. And the person that thought of this was very smart, very creative. So there you go. Big Friendly Giant. There you go. That's the one. Thank you so much. I think I should make a short film. I wish I had time to make a short film. Okay, how do you know what the person wants when he or she is giving a test to be in their modeling company, especially for modeling? Well, that's a good question. The thing is this, when you go in for an interview, it's important to know who you're talking to. Let me explain that. I don't know if you guys saw a movie that was recently, or not a movie, like a video that was posted on my channel about a behind-the-scenes tour at an Archviz studio in Wales, right? Now, my good friend Sean Ellis works there. He interviewed a bunch of his colleagues, and they talked about this, right? Now, you can imagine, as a 3D artist, if you go into a studio for an interview, right, and you are talking to the owner who is a 3D artist, right? They will ask you different questions than if you have an interview with, let's say, a human resources person who is not a 3D artist, right? So you need to understand before you walk in that door who you are talking to. So try to find out, right? Talk to people you know, look on LinkedIn, try to see what their background is. What have they done in the past? Have they worked on games, on movies? And that will give you a better understanding of why they're asking you what they're asking you, right? If you don't know who you're going to be talking to, then at least try to find out as much as you can about the company. What they're looking for is people that will help to do more of what they've already been doing, right? So if they get a certain style of movie or game, right, talk towards the skills you have that will support them in doing more of that. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's see. Velek saying, is it optional to learn program language on Maya? Is it optional? Everything's optional. I mean, is it a good idea? Yeah, I would say so. I mean, for Maya, it's mostly Mel scripting and Python, right? And the difference there is that Mel is a specific Maya language that can only be used in Maya, to my understanding. Python, however, is a scripting language that can be used much wider than that. Do you need it all the time? I wouldn't say so. Does it help if you know how to do that? For sure. Let's see what else. I'm from India. I want to be an animator, but there's no 3D animation scope. I don't know what you mean by scope. Do you mean school? It says how you did. Can you tell us about how did you end up here? How do you get started in this industry? Okay. Well, how I got started. Well, I actually did a video on my channel basically telling my story exactly. But in a nutshell, just for those of you who haven't seen that, I, at a very young age, started to fiddle around with computers. And yes, I'm very, very old. So when I started playing with computers and building computers and writing code and programming and all that, we're talking about 1981, right? The problem was there was no 3D because it didn't exist yet. There wasn't, Windows didn't exist. Computers were barely out there. So I did everything myself. But at the same time, I was crazy about drawing, right? And once I found out that you could draw in 3D with computers, I basically never went back, right? So I kind of developed together with the industry. And yeah, that's how that worked. But I did a video on my story on my channel, so you can check that. Let's see. Okay, has the industry got really hard to break into since the 90s or 2000s? Absolutely. The thing is this, and this applies to any industry, right? Whenever you have a new industry, and I mean, the 3D industry, yeah, let's say it started in the 90s. I mean, 3D animation, true computer generated 3D animation basically started in 1995, right? With the launch of Toy Story 1, John Lasseter, Pixar, and so forth. Now, I actually watched Toy Story 2 yesterday, which is amazing. And for today's standards, it looked like shit, right? But it was amazing, right? So once an industry becomes popular and more people are going to do this, you got more competition, right? There's more money in it, so more people are doing it. So the expectation level goes up. So it's harder for you as a 3D artist to meet that standard. That makes sense, right? So yeah, I got way more technical. Now, my advice is this, though, that looking at the industry as a whole, I mean, if you look at the guys and girls, right? And with guys, I mean guys and girls, working at Pixar in 1995, they had to figure out everything by themselves because there wasn't anything, right? If you wanted something, figure it out, right? Now, so many years later, all of that technical aspect, although it's developing rapidly, in my personal opinion, is not the strict scope of what a 3D artist should focus on, right? Sure, you need to know all the technical stuff. Sure, you need to know the software. But what makes a good artist a great artist is the ability to understand the process. So what is the director doing? What is the producer doing? What story are they telling? What's important about the story? And how can I, as the 3D artist, contribute to that, right? If you can do that, then you will have work forever. Let's see. What is the most required field in the 3D industry? Which post will have? Well, the most jobs are basically as a generalist, right? So you do a little bit about everything. I wouldn't say it's the best paid job, but it's one that is most frequently asked for. If you're talking about what is the best paid job, right? I would go with a lighting artist, right? Lighting artists, believe it or not, is very, very difficult. And it ties into what I said before. Why is lighting so important? Is because lighting determines the atmosphere, and therefore, as a result, it determines the look and feel of the movie, and therefore controls your emotion as a viewer. Now, as a movie maker, what you want, and not as just as a movie maker, as any artist, what you want to do is you want to tap into the emotion of your viewer, right? So if you can control the emotional strings of a viewer, you can control their behavior, and therefore you can control the success of the movie. Okay, let's see. How different should the portfolio for a 3D environment artist be to that of a 3D prop artist? Is a 3D prop artist a real thing? Of course it's a real thing. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say they would call it a 3D prop artist, but basically what a 3D prop artist does is a lot of hard surface modeling, right? So, typical street objects, barrels, crates, pallets, all that kind of stuff, right? Now, an environment artist is a whole different thing because they will literally make scenes. They can make cities, mountains, rivers, forests, all that kind of stuff. Very, very, very different thing, right? Let's see. Greetings from Germany. Also, grüß dich. Right now, I'm sitting in university studying Maya and prefer watching your live videos. Thank you for all the great tutorials. Yeah, I mean a lot. Well, you are very, very welcome. Which part of you're not in Munich at Media Hochschule, are you? Which part of 3D industry is furthest from becoming automatized? Okay, well, the thing is this, and this is not just a discussion inside the realms of 3D art, but basically in any aspect, right? And that is, will we be replaced, by automated processes, by robots and whatnot, right? SAE, very good choice. Okay, so one thing, in my belief, you can never replace is the creative human mind. So that is, again, what I just said, right? If you know all the technical aspects of modeling, how to model, I mean, maybe someday, you'll have an app, you scan something in 3D and you got a perfect 3D model, fully textured, great topology and all that. So you don't need a modeler anymore, right? The thing is, though, that the whole concept of what this thing looks like and what it's going to act like and how it's going to perform in a certain setting and what kind of story it's going to tell, that is a creative process. And for that, you need people, right? So understanding what makes a great story, understanding how you can contribute to that great story will make sure that you're not just a keyboard pusher, right? You're an artist. That's the difference. Okay, a few more minutes, guys. Any other questions? Okay, is there a way to know if I'm ready for a job? Yes. have an interview, and if they say you're hired, you're ready. I mean, that sounds like I'm not taking your question serious, but in reality, I'm very serious. I mean, it's people always say, okay, so when can I call myself professional? You're professional when people pay you money, right? Because if you have to wait until you are the most professional artist in the world, you'll never work. There's always going to be somebody better, right? So what you do is you start somewhere, and you start making something for the kid next door, and you get $10 for it, right? Are you a professional? Well, technically you are, because you got paid. Are you a great artist? No, not yet, but you're going to start to work on that. And over time and over years, I mean, just get up out of bed, work on it, work on it, work on it, and over time you will get better, right? Ah, there we go. I thought, when is that question going to come up? Is swapping Maya to Blender a good step? Now, a lot of people are moving to Blender for the simple fact that they believe that Maya is way too expensive with their subscriber-based payments, all of that, and they can't afford it, so they're going to move towards Blender. Now, as of yet, in the industry, it's still all about 3ds Max and Maya, in my opinion, right? Blender is here and there used. There are studios that use Blender. The thing is, though, because Blender is open sourced and free for users to use, their development is usually a bit slower, for the simple reason that they don't have the funding to do it quicker, right? Now, 2.8 is a huge change compared to what it was before. But if you look at the funding that's behind, for example, Autodesk Maya, what you will see is that other companies will work with them to develop technology quicker because of that money. I'll give you an example. Maya 2020, right? So Maya 2020 supports GPU-based rendering. Now, one of the reasons for that is Autodesk has been looking at GPU-based rendering for decades, right? NVIDIA partnered up with Maya to develop this over time because they both had the resources to do this. As a result, Maya 2020 now supports GPU-based rendering. Now, if they didn't have these resources, I don't think that would have happened, right? So that's my theory on it. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's at least my thought on it, right? Okay, so I'm going to do one final question, guys. Let's see. Okay, I am going to go with the following question. What is your advice for junior 3D artists who needs to have much creativity in their world, but at the same time looking for work? Okay. Now, let me compare it this way. Let's say you have somebody living in Los Angeles who wants to become an actor, right? Thousands of people go to Hollywood because they want to be the next great thing. They want to get hired. They want to be famous and all that, right? But at the meantime, they have to pay rent. They have to pay for food and all that. So what they do is they go and work as a waiter or something, right? Now, it's work that is very flexible because you can get a job as a waiter basically everywhere. It doesn't pay a lot, but it gives you a lot of freedom. Freedom to go to class if you want to, freedom to go to an audition if you want to, and so forth. And it's kind of similar with being a 3D artist. I mean, how eager are you? How hungry are you? How bad do you want this, right? I, for years, did 3D besides my 80-hour-a-week job, right? So I would work 100, 110 hours a week. And people would say, you're nuts. I didn't make any money on 3D for a while, right? But if you want it, you'll do it. That's your focus. And, try and keep it small. Don't work towards some great scheme. Okay, I'm going to keep on working on my skills until I get hired by Pixar, because maybe it will never happen, right? Just start somewhere, do something, and learn and learn and learn and learn, right? And the funny thing is, people say it's all about luck, right? Well, the funny thing is, the harder you work and the more time you invest, the luckier you get. There you go. Okay, guys. Well, that's it for me. Thank you guys so much. I think you're all awesome. So many people on the live stream here. I think that's really cool. And yeah, what I'll do is I'll put down my email address right here, just in case you guys have any questions. And you can send me an email. And before I go, in case you guys are not a member of my Facebook Hangout group just yet, I'll post a link because there are over 3,000 3D artists from live streams and other groups that became a member, and we just hang out together and we share and we learn and so forth. So just give me 1 second, I'll get that link, right? And I always mention that link when I'm doing this. So you're all invited, and come on in and have some fun, and then we can hang out some more, right? Okay, well, like I said, okay, you go back to Big Bang Theory, have fun. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.